Welcome to the Poetry Podcast with A, an Amber Michelle's work production.
Hello, happy Thursday, the first Thursday of the month of November. I hope everyone had such a good Halloween. I love Halloween. I have my house decorated for Halloween and just fall in general, and it feels so good. It just makes you feel so cozy inside, just the little details that you can have just up and around your house. I definitely focused on inside decorations this year. Next year, I'm going to get to the yard. We just moved into this house this year, and we moved while I was pregnant, and I could only do so much. You know what I mean? Like moving into a house when you've lived in an apartment your entire lifetime as an adult, you realize there's a lot of things you have to buy to fill up a house and make it feel cozy. So, we focused on the inside this year. Next year, we'll focus on outside landscaping, all those things. So, yeah, I just hope that your Halloween was fun. It's, like I said, one of my favorite holidays, even though it's a pagan holiday. Oh, well, it's still my favorite. It's still really fun. I love dressing up, and not even like myself dressing up. I love seeing other people's costumes, especially the kids. I think kid costumes are so fun, and trick-or-treating and all the things. So yeah, I actually made little like goodie bags for my neighbors, the little kids that I'm close with in the neighborhood. They're so excited for my baby, and they're so cute. Sacred and Trinity and Jennifer, I made them their own little special trick-or-treating bag. So when they came to the door, they had their own with their name written on it. It was really cute to see them in their costumes. So I hope you had just as good as a Halloween as I did. But for today, let's dive in. And also, I don't know if you can tell this, I am just breathing a lot heavier these days. So I'm sorry if I have to take a breath and catch myself just breathing a lot, because talking like this makes me out of breath. It's ridiculous. I just get shallow breath being so pregnant and having something just growing inside of you. So I apologize if I'm a little breathy on these episodes coming up to my due date. I really do apologize, especially the solo episodes, because I don't really get a full chance to listen and take that breath while someone else is talking. You know what I mean? But that's okay. We're going to get through it, because today we have such a good Q&A. This person messaged me on LinkedIn, and they wrote a long little piece, but I am going to just read a little bit of it to get the gist of their question. And I'm excited to answer this one with everyone. So they said, I feel like most folks who are storytellers gravitate toward visuals or written forms. But to see you creating poetry and co-founding / co-owning Stellar Image Studios is inspiring. Do you feel like it's hard to go back and forth? Okay, so if you don't know what Stellar Image Studios is, that was the video production company I previously owned up until about 3 to 5 months ago, we'll say. So it was 3 to 4, 3 to 5 months ago. So, you know me in numbers, we don't get along, so I don't really have to count those out, and we don't really care about those. So pretty much I was running this video production company with my sister. Shout out Stellar Image Studios. Love y'all. Love everyone that works there. I'm right now consulting with them, and I'm not owning, but this person didn't realize that I had sold my shares. But that's okay, because I can still answer this, because I was co-owning the business while I was writing my debut book. And I have a lot of thoughts that surround this. And even now, when I am writing my next book, I'm going to have a new sense of responsibility, a sense of work that I'll have to form new routines around and new processes. So, one thing that I think is really important when you are balancing your work and your passion, let's just say like my work was running the business, my passion was writing the book. That's, I think, what this person is getting at when they're like, how do you go back and forth between the two? And it's just something you have to do, because in the world we live in, most of us have to have money to survive. Most of us aren't living on a commune, like we live in this economy. We have to pay the bills. We have to buy groceries. We don't hunt and gather like we did back in the days. So we have real life problems that we have to solve with money. And how do you get money? You have a job. So how can you balance that with wanting to do something completely else with your life in terms of that passion? So that passion of mine was writing my book. That work of mine was running a business. So I always had to separate the two in terms of like, was I in work mode or was I in passion mode? So I think this just came natural for me, but when I'm really reflecting on it, it's important to do this, is that give your 100% self to the task at hand. So when I was at work, I was at work. And my hours were long, I would have really early mornings, sometime late evenings, depending on what the schedule was, early call times, and just after hour conversations with my business partner. That's just what it takes to run a business. And I always would put that first, because to me, that was the most important commitment in my life, and it morally just felt right. So I would have to say that like you have to choose one or the other when you are kind of flip-flopping back and forth, and you have to feel good about making the decision of like, what is the main priority? My main priority really wasn't my passion right at that moment. It was something else. It was this company that people depended on me to help run. That was the main priority. So I would always be giving myself 100%. And by giving myself this 100% commitment and work, I guess just like giving my attention to the company 100% of the time allowed me to get my shit done. And it allowed me to stay on top of the work. That way I could carve out spaces for the passion for the writing. So what I mean by that is like I would take time to go on a solo trip and take a week off work and go and cut myself off, shut off my phone to work on this passion project that I was working on with the book. And I think that was really, really helpful for me in my process of having to run a business and wanting to do this side thing. I sacrificed relationships, friendships. I would even say during this time, I sacrificed a little bit of my relationship with my then fiance and boyfriend, now husband, but I would sacrifice time even with him to get this book written. And he respected that and loved me for it, but it was still a sacrifice that we had to talk through and be like, I have to do this for me. So I think that's what I mean of like, choose your one thing that you're giving 100% to. And then once you're able to feel good about the work that you're doing there, then you can kind of take time off. And it's actually good for that work and that business that you're running or that company that you're working for to get your mind off it, because sometimes you just can't constantly be working on the same thing. You need breaks. And that's what I chose to do with my breaks, was to work on this other project. And despite the times that I would go on solo trips for like a week, and where would I go? I would go to places in nature. I would go to haunted hotels because that's my thing. But I would just go with no one, because you can go on a writing retreat and have connection with other people. But for me, those would have been more of a distraction than really just focusing inward and getting that writing done that needs to happen. Because I was almost felt like I was making up for lost time, because a lot of the time when you hear people writing a book, they're writing every single day. They're doing it first thing in the morning. But realistically, with the way my life was set up at that time, I wasn't able to do that. It just wouldn't have worked. It wouldn't have been fair to the business I was running. So that was one thing I did. I would do solo trips. Or this is also really important too, is even though you're giving yourself 100% to your work, you have to still have an open heart and open mind to the muse that will come, and the little lyrical sound and poem that just kind of floats into your mind, and you have to capture that. So any way that you have to capture that, write it down on a piece of paper, talk it into your phone. You have to capture it before it floats away. And once you kind of collect all those, take those into your solo writing trips and workshop them. But don't let them float away. Even when you're like, there was a time in my life that I was really good about waking up in the middle of the night and writing something down. Once that came to me, and then I would go back to it later. But as long as you have that main piece of thought to write down and go back to, that's better than nothing. Because if you don't write it down, it will get lost in the universe. It'll float into someone else's mind. So it's really important to do that. And I think that was just how I was able to get that done, was carving out that time, that space. And if I wasn't going on a solo trip, I would just kind of take a day out of the weekend to cut things off and heads down, focus on the writing. So even if it wasn't a week, I would carve out a day, just anything that felt realistic. So that's just like my one piece of advice, is really figuring out what is more important to sustain your life. And once you have clarity on that, move forward and start to really be intentional with your time. What can you cut out in your time? Can you cut out social events? Can you cut out shows, TV, things like that? I also wasn't watching TV at this time. When I was, at this time I was living with my fiance, now husband, but we weren't watching television. So I really had these open spaces to write. And that's really how I got through that first book, was anytime something floated in my mind, I put it on paper. And usually that happened. My book was about addiction. So when I was struggling with something, when I was getting a craving, I'd write something down. Or if I overcame a craving, I'd write something down. And that's just, I had all these short little poems that then I took to these solo trips and really workshop them. And that's how I was able to go back and forth, was keeping my main priority, and or like just, yeah, keeping my main priority, but then switching when the time was right. And you have to carve out that time due to your work schedule. And that's just what you have to do. So where I'm at now in my writing process, I'll admit I don't really have a good one currently because I'm going through this transition of not owning the business and going into motherhood. And I've been sick. I've been really trying to adapt to this new lifestyle of being a mother and setting up a whole new nursery and going and taking care of my body and cooking good homemade meals. And I'm almost waiting like for this baby to get here so I can start a full new routine of carving out that time for writing whenever baby naps or whenever food is done, getting cooked and prepped, put away. Because really coming up in my life, my main priority is going to be my child and my family. So that is going to be number one. It's still not going to be my writing. I just don't know if writing ever will be because of maybe when I'm retired from being a mother. Are you ever retired from being a mother? You know what I mean? When the kids are out of the house, maybe that's the time that my writing will be that number one main priority. But even though it's not my main priority, it's still in my top priorities. So I will still carve out space for it. And I'm excited for that. I really am. I'm excited to get a new routine. Maybe it will be different because I probably won't be able to take these solo trips and go on week-long trips when I have a baby at home. So I think I will have to switch it up in terms of crafting something new, like writing every day. A lot of writers do that. And maybe when I set my goals in January for the new year, that will be one of them. I haven't really fully dove into that. Maybe that's a podcast episode that I'll go into, is setting goals and how I go about that. I think that would actually be a really cool one. So I will do that. But for now, I am taking a break from the routines and the goals and everything. I'm just in this transition and I'm letting myself be there. Okay, sidetracked. But another thing when you're going in this back and forth, work and passion, is you have to keep yourself accountable. How do you do that? Having someone pushing you along the way is a great idea. Like having an accountability partner. So my accountability partner was my editor. We spoke monthly, I would say, and I always had something to improve on, either if it was like a chapter, because I sent my work to him chapter by chapter. At first, I sent the whole book, and then he's like, honey, you got to rewrite this because this shit don't make sense. So I rewrote it after reading some books. I've talked about it before. Elements of Style was a huge book. I will preach that book to the day I die, baby. And that really helped me keep accountable, was being able to have these deadlines, even though that it wasn't like super crazy deadline driven by like a publisher or something. It was just between us of like, hey, okay, I'll get this chapter done by the next time we meet. Okay, I will fix these 5 poems and work on these little tweaks. That's just kind of what my accountability looked like. And also I really actually took out the deadlines of like, I need to get this book done by this time. I need to do this and that, because that just adds pressure. And for my debut book, it wasn't about that. It wasn't for anyone else but me to get that book out there. So I had all the time in the world. Time doesn't really exist once you take out those deadlines. And why stress yourself out? It really, really isn't worth it if you're stressing out about a deadline. Honestly, in my opinion, maybe it's different if there's a publisher involved, but if there's not a publisher involved, this is your first debut book and you're stressing yourself out for no reason, just remember you don't have to stress yourself out. And another thing that an accountability partner will do for you is make sure you're staying on track. So like for me, when I was writing my book, I was also filming these like vignettes for social media, and they were like these high-end video shoots that I was spending money on and hiring a stylist and a background photographer, like a BTS photographer, behind the scenes photographer, and someone to help with the video, and like all these things that just weren't as important as the writing itself. So if you're writing a book but you're getting distracted by like the way you want to appear and look on things like social media, I would really advise you to reset that priority, because there's nothing more important than the writing itself. That was great advice by my editor. I also say he is a mentor to me. He'd be like, you're literally spending time away from your writing. You're using this as a distraction, even if you don't know it. And that really stuck with me, and it really helped me finish my book. So despite how cool those photo shoots were and sets, they just weren't important. I still did do them, but I did do them still because I love film and things, but I didn't let it consume me as much. Like the first one I did in winter, it consumed so much, and then I kind of dialed them back. So I would say I took the advice with a grain of salt. I still think it's great advice though. But I just don't know. I mean, I didn't really get that much of a following from it, but I still think it's important to show up on social, and one day maybe it will pay off. We'll see. I do advise people to show up on social for getting into this industry as a writer, because if your goal one day is to get published and to be seen, it's just the world we live in. We have to show up on a digital platform. That's just the way it is. So we're trying out here. We're trying. So if you feel that struggle of showing up on the social media, just know I am with you. And something that I always say to myself is, if you're not having fun while showing up on social media, it's not worth it. Just like the book, if you're not having fun, it's not worth it. If you're not having fun at work, it's not worth it. Life is too short. There's so many opportunities out there for you to be happy and live a happier life, that you shouldn't settle for something that's not making you happy. So that's what's happened to me, especially with social media. I had to take a break, and it was during that time of launching my book. I launched my book and I was so burnt out from the social. I just completely stopped promoting it, and I kind of regained a new sense of confidence around it. I started up again recently, and it feels good now. It really does. It's different than before. You just can't get too caught up, and you always have to remember who you are. So that would really be my advice in the social media game when you're trying to push your passion onto social media. Just know that that is not your worth. Social media is not the worth of your art, of your work. It's so much higher than that. And usually a lot of times people won't say that to you, or they'll say it to your face and they won't say it on the platform that you're posting on. But just remember, it's true. You in your work is valued so much higher than a following on social media. Okay, so that's kind of my second piece of advice with balancing that passion, is just seeking that accountability and never giving up. Never giving up. That accountability partner will help you stay on track. So then my third piece of advice when you are balancing between the back and forth of work and passion would be being extremely aligned with your mind, body, and spirit. So what does that mean? Let's just kind of take your spirit as an example to start. We'll kind of go through the three. But with your spirit, I think it's really important to know what your morals are. And the reason why it's important to know what your morals are, because you need to wake up feeling good about yourself, to be in the best headspace to either work on your passion or to work for your job. And if you're feeling so morally aligned within yourself, your work is going to be better. Your passion is going to feel good when you're working on it, and it'll give you those space, that time and space inside yourself to carve out time, because you'll most likely be ahead of the game. Then. So with your spirit, write down your morals. What are the most important things that align with you? What is your purpose for your passion, your purpose for your work? Know those things, not just subconsciously, but consciously, so you can show up for the best version of yourself every single day. And you will get things done once you're not feeling guilty or ashamed about something from your past, or something you did last night, or that you are planning to do in the future. I think that's really important, to make sure you just know exactly who you are when you are showing up for yourself or for other people. Okay, so body to me is knowing your intuition and knowing how to feel the best inside the body. So intuitively, something that I know is like waking up and immediately moving my body is something that just feels right. So I either wake up and I stretch immediately, or if I slept in a little bit, I'll wake up and take the pups on a walk. Because I know he needs it and I need it, but the first things I do is stretch, walk. And there's little things in between, like I might drink a glass of water or take some protein, some supplements, vitamins, and then do those things. But like the first hour of waking up, those are two main things that I'm doing. I'm getting outside, breathing in fresh air, and just for my body, that is what I always need. And then I'll come back and eat a nutritious breakfast. I used to not eat breakfast at all. It would just be caffeine. But now, just learning more about my body and what it needs, it's protein in the morning. And it makes me feel so good just by listening to my body and what it really needs. It's moving my body and nourishing my body. So I think that's really important, to wake up and, again, showing up for the work and the passion. You have to energetically feel right. So not just about your morals, but just simply the way your mind is functioning. You need it to operate at a high level. And this kind of takes your mind. So kind of going in now, these all kind of relate to each other, the mind, body, and spirit, but focusing on just the mind now, your mind needs to be disciplined. You have to control your mind. You cannot let it go floating and letting it do what it wants, because I really like this quote. It's called create before you consume. I've said it to friends before and it always really hits with them. Sometimes I'm not able to create before consume, but that discipline in your mind of doing that is really helpful. So that is something that like I want to do in my future, even though when I was writing this book, running this company, I wasn't really creating before consuming on most days. But the reason why I say that is because your mind just has to be really disciplined and you have to control your mind so you don't get influenced by everything that's surrounding you in your society. And like sometimes you kind of have to remember that what's inside your heart, your morals, that spirit, that body piece is more true than what the mind is saying. So what your heart is saying is more true than what your mind is saying, because with your mind and where it's located, this is where you consume everything. You consume everything by what you eat, by what you hear, by what you see. That's so much consumption and so much stimulation that with your heart, it's kept captive right here. It is what you want morally and spiritually is here rather than here. So if you're ever stuck between that decision of like what to do, what should I do today, just know that here lies the truth and lies your true answer if you're struggling with that. And if you're listening when I'm kind of like pointing here and here, I'm pointing at my head when I'm talking about the mind, and when I'm pointing at my chest when I'm talking about the heart space. That the heart space is really what is true, in your mind is what is more apt to get confused. So if you're ever struggling with that, those are kind of my little tips of how to stay balanced by your work and your passions. So I hope though that really like resonated with you, and hopefully this resonates with the person who asked this question. Most importantly, I'm really happy I was able to take it on the podcast and talk about it. I have been there and I've been through a lot in terms of business and passion work. So if you ever want to do like a one-on-one conversation and session, I would love to meet with you. Again, just reach out and I would love to help. I'm such an open person, very collaborative. So let me know your questions, and I hope that this Thursday is a great one, and I'll see you next Thursday. Bye, y'all.
Thank you for tuning in to this week's episode. Leave me a review on your favorite listening channel, Spotify, Apple, or YouTube. I'd love to hear from you. Always with love, A.